Chapter 8. George and Evelyn Freeman, Oregon State Forest Cabin, just after midnight. Thud, thud, thud. George bolted upright in bed. The loud banging on the front door startled him awake. Beside him, Evelyn arose with a start. "What was that, baby?" Evelyn asked sleepily. George quickly reached for the bedside lamp switch and turned it on, but nothing happened. "It worked last night," he thought. Thud, thud, thud. The banging continued at the front door. "I don't know. I'm looking for my boots. I think the power's out." Evelyn reached out toward her bedside table and illuminated the room with her cell phone. George saw his boots by the closet door. In the dim light, he made his way to the bedside and grabbed his handgun as well. Evelyn jumped out of bed and went to George's side. After lacing up his shoes, they both made their way to the front room. "Find your purse and wait in the kitchen. I'm going to find out who it is." Before George could make it to the front, the banging continued. "Fire department, resident, open the door now," the fireman shouted. Hearing this, George looked through the window to confirm, holding his handgun low and at the ready. Even though it was dark, he saw that it was indeed a uniformed fireman. He met eyes with Evelyn and saw her Smith & Wesson in hand, her expression a mix of uncertainty and fear. He reached to switch on the porch light, and when nothing happened, he remembered the electricity must be out. The emergency lights from a fire truck rolled into view and backlit the man at the door. All doubts now lay to rest. He unlatched the lock and swung open the door. Without any hesitation, the fireman immediately began explaining the situation. "Sir, we need you and everyone in the house to evacuate the area now. All local residents are being relocated to a nearby emergency center. There's a wildfire moving this way fast, and it's too big to stop. We need you to move out within the next 15 minutes. George could indeed smell the strong odor of smoke, now that the front door was wide open. Before he could even start responding, he noticed Evelyn began to move fast toward the back room, as she heard everything that was said. "What emergency shelter? How is that going to protect us from a wildfire? Where even is it?" George questioned skeptically. He thought driving out of the immediate area would be the safest, most logical bet. "They're local sheriff's deputies right out on the main road. They're directing all residents toward the shelter. It's about 10 miles out from here. Most local residents already know where it is. Sir, I do not have a lot of time. All I can tell you is as of right now, the town's completely surrounded with this fire, and all major highways and interstates are blocked. There's no way out. Our reports say the source of the fire is from New Year's Eve fireworks. That's all I know. I must move on to the next house. Please get your things and drive your vehicle onto the main road and go north. There are multiple sheriff patrol cars that will guide you the rest of the way." Saying nothing more, the fireman speedily turned around and jogged to the next house in the cul-de-sac. George could hear the wheels of the suitcase luggage rolling into the front room behind him. Closing the door, he turned and saw Evelyn had all their things packed back into their bags and ready to go. "It's a good thing we hadn't unpacked much the night before," he thought. "George, I don't want to go to any shelter. Let's drive out of here, away from the fire." Evelyn was sitting on the couch, putting on her socks and shoes. The smell of smoke was getting stronger, even inside. "I agree. I don't want to be stuck someplace we know nothing about. If it's possible to drive out, we will. But from what the fireman told me, we're surrounded. All the roads and highways leading out are completely blocked off," George told her, reiterating the information. He went to get the suitcase and dragged them behind himself, making his way towards the front door. Evelyn was up and quickly made her way in front of him, opening the door to let him out. She grabbed the truck keys off the front counter and followed him out into the night. The truck headlights illuminated the smoke-filled air as they drove north. After just a few minutes of driving, a sheriff's patrol car came into view, emergency lights flashing red and blue. George slowed and rolled down his window to talk to the deputy standing outside his door. A uniformed man with a large mustache approached the driver's side. George could see beads of perspiration making their way down the man's forehead. He adjusted his trooper's hat and spoke loudly. "Shelter's going to be on the left a few miles down. Other deputies are stationed alongside the turnoff, so there's no way you can pass it." George nodded his understanding and asked, "Are there any roads out of town we can take away from the fire?"
No, sir, the trooper responded with authority. If there were, I'd be headed out with my own family. All roads out of town are effectively cut off by the fire.
The man looked at Evelyn in the passenger seat, then back at George.
Pardon me for saying, but the entire situation is foobar, sir. I just delivered my own wife to the shelter myself. I'll be headed back that way soon. It's a safe place for you to be right now, as it used to be an old military base. The shelter goes inside the mountain. When you get there, you'll see what I mean.
The trooper had a slight southern accent. Looking into his eyes, George could tell he was being genuine.
All right, thanks. I suppose we'll see you there soon,
George said his goodbye to the man, rolled up his window, and drove onward. I think I remember my parents talking about this place. Whenever we came here to our vacation cabin growing up, my dad used to talk about what a great location it was, being so close to the shelter. It wasn't until I grew up a little I understood he meant a fallout shelter. Evelyn's parents were older when they'd given birth to her. Both had since passed, but George's brain worked out and put the facts together. It must have been during the Cold War. Facilities like that were gaining popularity and had been built all over the U.S. As time passed, they'd fallen out of mainstream talking points, and most Americans no longer even knew of their existence. When they finally arrived, 3 patrol cars, lights flashing, were parked in front of the line of trucks, SUVs, and cars slowly awaiting their turn to make a left. Following the deputy's direction into the long driveway of the mountainside shelter, they couldn't see the entrance yet due to the thick forest of pine trees obscuring their view. After about 10 minutes of waiting in line, they finally reached the front, where a man with a clipboard motioned for them to roll down their window. George obliged.
Names and address, please,
said the man, wearing an orange safety vest. They gave him their names and the address of the cabin. He then motioned toward the entrance.
Park your vehicle in the covered lot, bring only belongings you can carry, and follow the signs to processing.
George said okay, acknowledging he understood, and followed the line of cars down the long road. They passed signs illuminated by their headlights that said, "Stop, authorized personnel only," and others that said, "Caution, clearance required to enter." When they could finally see the entrance of the center, they found themselves staring at a gigantic stone entry, big enough for an aircraft. Once they drove past the threshold, George and Evelyn craned their necks upward to see fluorescent lighting mounted high up on the ceiling. In awe of their surroundings, Evelyn spoke softly to her husband. "I know this is just a parking lot, but it is amazing. How could they build something so big?" The mountainside structure was simply enormous. George watched as people scrambled for all the belongings they could carry with them into the shelter. More officer SUVs and patrol cars were ordering people toward the large bolted doors. Above the door read an illuminated sign that said, "Shelter Processing Entrance." As there was no lack in parking spaces, George reversed his Dodge Ram 2500 into a parking spot further away from the processing entrance, closer to the mountainside, pointed front so they could leave quickly if they needed to. Responding to his wife, he told her,
"It is quite impressive. Something doesn't feel right. Makes sense that this was an old military base, that's for sure. Let's just be careful. You have your concealed carry holster in your purse. You should take your Smith & Wesson shield and conceal it under your shirt. I'll do the same. If they ask you if we have any weapons, don't tell them you're carrying. I don't see why they would ask, but I want us to be on the same page."
George and Evelyn made their way back to the back of the line, and as if only to remind them of the fire, more smoke began wafting in through the cavernous entrance. The steady flow of cars edged along into the garage as George and Evelyn waited patiently to get to the front of the line. George couldn't help but feel like he was entering a FEMA camp. He found it rather strange that the fire could engulf a circle of flame around their town and not leave one single light on. The fire was real, no doubt about that, as the smell and evidence of smoke was undeniable. But as a man who regularly questioned everything, he couldn't let his doubt of the situation lay to rest. As they inched their way closer to the front of the line, it seemed to grow longer and longer, and it surprised them how many people were already in the facility. The parking lot was nowhere near full, yet the number of people was impressive. When they were next in line, they could hear the questions being asked to the family in front of them. The men who were in charge of processing were not uniformed deputies, but instead wore plain gray jumpsuits with name tag identifying badges. The men stood behind a kiosk, and the room was painted white, illuminated with fluorescent lighting. Benches lined the room in double doors. Two large double doors with shatter-resistant windows were located at the end of the rectangular room. The family that was being processed sat in a group together at the doors and seemed to be waiting. Names and residential address, please. They were asked again by the man in the jumpsuit. George gave the information and read off his name tag. Brother Nathaniel Wortmeyer. The man had middle-length brown hair and seemed to be a tad on the heavier side. The other man standing next to him was lanky and tall with short blonde hair. They were both young, and his name tag read, Brother Fogel Simons. The blonde one front spoke first in a voice that showed even more his youth. Please take your belongings and join the others in the waiting room. George and Evelyn made their way to sit next to the other family who was watching the news broadcast on a flat-screen TV attached to the wall. The coverage showed the town completely engulfed in flames. Evelyn took out her cell phone and quickly tried to call Sarah. The line was busy. I can't get through to Sarah. She urgently grabbed George by the arm and looked at him with a worried expression on her face. George took out his cell phone and tried to call her, but it went straight to voicemail. Try sending a text. Sometimes when the lines are busy, text messages can still go through. There's been an emergency and a huge fire was started here in town. The fire department evacuated your dad and I from the cabin. We're safe from the fire right now in a shelter. After hitting send on the message, she looked for the name of the shelter. Reading all the literature posted on the walls of the processing room, she didn't see anything that said definitively what the shelter was called. Vatican, funded Archdynasty's Refugee Center. Founded 1890. She took a picture of the poster and sent it to her daughter. After she sent the messages, she tried calling 5 more times, with still no answer. 2 more families and a crowd of other people had joined them now in the processing room. Brother Nathaniel addressed the room from the far end over a PA system. Please remain patient, folks. Transport to the main shelter will be arriving shortly. George started to comprise a text to Sarah of his own. He reiterated their circumstances, explaining how the shelter was built into a mountain underground, almost. In his text, he explained how their vehicle had been safely parked away in the shelter's entrance. As soon as the fire burns itself out, we're going to head back. I need you and Naomi to go home immediately and wait there with Grandpa Pete and Grandma Lynn. I love you. Don't worry about us. Right now, your mom and I are 100% safe. Please respond or call us as soon as you get this. A yellow strobe light began to shine above the double-door entrance. 5 passenger transport golf carts made their way toward the group. 2 young Catholic men were busy ushering in the rest of the town's residents. Sheriff's deputies were beginning to enter through the entrance. George looked for the one he talked to on the road, but couldn't find him yet. That must mean most of the town's people are here already if the officers are coming in. George recalled hearing they would be the last to arrive. Everyone please form a line. The transport carts can take 30 at a time. From what George could tell, all the cars were electric. They were not making any sound at all. People started loading their belongings onto the large seats and grouping onto the carts. When it was George and Evelyn's turn, they grabbed their stuff and headed over to the cars themselves. The driver of the cart saw Evelyn on her phone. You'll lose signal if you haven't already, but once we get to the residential safe area, there are landlines, even TVs that show the news. They drove for what seemed about 10 minutes. The caravan of golf carts pulled into what looked like a small parking bay. Jumpsuit-wearing workers who also bore the Catholic name badges brought over hotel luggage carts. One of the attendants announced, Please load all of your belongings onto these luggage carts and have a seat in the main dormitory. You'll find through these doors there are food and beverage commodities, and everyone will have access to their temporary lodging facilities downstairs within the next few hours. Until then, please help yourself to the food and refreshments. Find your seats and get comfortable.
Wait patiently while we catalog and organize where everyone will be staying. Meanwhile, during the duration of the crisis, please enjoy your stay with the Archdiocese Catholic Center for Refugees."
The crowd of townspeople started shuffling about, and the volume of their voices grew louder as the sound of individual conversations grew together in unison. George pulled Evelyn close to him and whispered in her ear,
"Let's go somewhere we can talk."
Evelyn nodded and grabbed their bags, going to a far-off corner beside a TV showing the image of a helicopter flying over the bright flames. The picture showed a blaze that was massive. The fireman at his door had told him it had started with fireworks. This showed a different story. This was not fireworks. This was no accident.
"I have no service."
George looked at his phone with concern. "We're just going to have to hope things get resolved soon. In the meantime, let's count our blessings. We don't appear to be in any danger. Don't you find this strange, that this place is fully staffed, like a functioning hotel? But it's much more than that. If this is a center for refugees, they're obviously running an operation."
"I have so many questions, and a couple of speculations. I've waited to tell you until we're out of earshot. I think I know what this place is. If that's the case, then we may or may not be fine. The enormity of this place makes me wonder if it is something much more than that."
"What do you mean you know what this place is?" Evelyn questioned.
4 years now. There have been video reports of Catholic-ran organizations that these would fly airplanes of immigrants in from all over the world into the U.S. Undocumented people of all nationalities, thousands every month flown in and unloaded in the middle of the night, sent all over America. People speculated about a replacement plan to replace the population of American people with foreign nationals. Others hypothesized something much darker. Evidence even supported their claims that especially women and children flown or brought in illegally were let in and then moved to an underground facility like this one for a nefarious purpose: human trafficking, organ harvesting, and the underground sex trade. They promised families their children would have a better place in America. Little did they know, when they crossed the border, they would be professionally disappeared without a trace. The whole topic was a very sad one. They would bring women in of childbearing age, or ones who survived long enough to be childbearing age. They would repeatedly be impregnated, and those babies would be undocumented and sold.
The expression on Evelyn's face was pure astonishment. Her eyes were wide, awestruck that they could be stuck in such a place. "George, that sounds like something your brother would say," stated Evelyn.
George replied, "He knows a lot about this type of thing, yes, although he sent me a few long videos about the history of underground tunnels and subways that have existed in the USA for over a century in LA. They were huge underground railways used frequently by society for travel. But in the recent past, they boarded up all the underground tunnels. They became long forgotten, even covered up and excluded by the history books and in classrooms."
George continued explaining.
"Did you notice how big the halls are in this place? There's likely more here than they're letting us know."
Just then, the double doors to a large day room opened, and another group of people shuffled in. Everyone watched as they entered. George saw immediately that it was a group of women and children, and they all looked to be immigrants. They were being led in by two men from earlier, Brother Nathaniel Wortmeyer and Brother Fogel Simons. They were speaking in Spanish to the new arrivals. From what he could tell, they were instructing them to sit at the tables. It struck George as a little odd how fluently the two Catholic workers used the Spanish language. Mexican immigrants were all sitting on the other half of the day room hall now, and the two workers announced loudly to the room,
"We have emergency news to share with everyone. Shortly we will be sealing the blast doors to this facility. We've received intel that the United States has been attacked on multiple fronts. One attack was off the East Coast. A nuclear bomb was detonated in the airspace over the North Atlantic Ocean, as well as another blast in the airspace somewhere over the Gulf of America."
Hearing this, George's heartbeat quickened. He looked at Evelyn and saw her face go pale. She squeezed his hand, and the townspeople burst into a commotion, shouting at the men. Brother Fogel unmuted the TV that had been reporting on the footage of the fires. A few people stepped toward them, shouting questions. As they tried easing them back, George looked over at his wife just in time to see a tear stream down Evelyn's cheek. He started to quietly pray, and she joined him. They asked God to keep their daughter safe and help them all to get home to each other, no matter what happened. He prayed to God to give them peace about the situation. The whole day room had erupted into chaos as they finished their prayer. George noticed an older woman also praying with what looked like her granddaughter at the next table. Everyone was frantically milling about, trying to get a better view of the TV and the horrible news. George knew about the effects a bomb had on the airspace. His brother Leo had sent him videos about EMP preparedness, electromagnetic pulses that happened when a nuclear device was detonated at a high altitude. Any electronic device within the range of the blast would be fried. Cell phones, generators, televisions, even cars. The fact that the news was still broadcasting gave him hope. He noticed the older woman and her granddaughter had stopped praying and were approaching them. With her voice loud enough to hear over the noise of the room, she spoke. "My name is Rose, and this is my granddaughter, Madeline." Madeline was younger, maybe 12 or 13. She had light brown hair and green eyes that matched her grandma. "We came over because we heard you praying too." The older woman seemed to have a calm demeanor, but Madeline clung to her side, seeming unsure of everything that was happening. They were both dressed in their pajamas, as many people were having been evacuated from the fire in the middle of the night. "My name is George. This is my wife, Evelyn." He introduced them both as they shook hands. "Please sit down. Looks like we're going to be here for a while." Rose and Madeline took a seat at the opposite end of the table. "I was just telling Evelyn that the fact the news is reporting about the bombs is a good thing, because when that type of bomb detonates at a high altitude, it causes an EMP effect, which causes the electronics to stop working." George went on to explain all the details in the simplest of terms to the ladies. "Long story short, America hasn't been directly hit that we know of by any bomb. However, this EMP blast could very well be just as bad." Young Madeline's eyes were glued to the TV, but George could tell she was listening. Rose seemed to comprehend everything George was saying. Evelyn's heart was pounding 100 beats a minute. She just wanted to get out of here and back to her daughter. She felt her face flush crimson and felt tears prick her eyes. Up until now, she had been trying to remain calm. She could deal with a forest fire, but now this? The floodgates opened and her breathing became panicked. When George turned to her, he stopped talking, but she was already audibly crying in her seat. Little Madeline saw this and turned her eyes away from the TV to look questioningly at her grandmother. "Grandma Rose, are we going to be okay?" she asked questioningly, with a bit of fear brimming her tone. George put an arm comfortingly around his wife, tried to quietly console her. Rose answered, "We're in the Lord's hands, baby." Then the lights went out.